Hi, and welcome to a demonstration of the Better Terrain add-on for Godot. Here I have an example project. It has a tile map node which has a tile set, and I have some tiles that I'm going to use. But first, let's install the plugin. The easiest way to do that is to go to the asset library, search for Better Terrain, there it is, and then click download. Now you don't need the git ignore, the license or readme, but everything inside the add-ons folder is needed. Click install that. Now when you do this, you'll probably get a whole lot of errors because the order in which stuff gets initialized is a bit tricky. But if you go into project settings, then plugin, and enable the plugin, and then restart Godot, you should find it's working. So I'm going to save and quit and restart the engine, and you should have Better Terrain working. You see a terrain option down the bottom for your tile map. So let's start off. I'm going to start off by adding this grass platform tile set. So I go into the tile set editor just as you'd expect, drop that in. I'm going to automatically create tiles. And we have 16 tiles. We've got rectangles, vertical and horizontal lines, and single ones. So let's look at how you would make a basic terrain for that. If you go to the terrain tab, there's some options for how terrains are drawn, how they're set up, and also there's a zoom, as well as some other options here and down here. By default, you'll see just the decoration, which we'll talk about later. For now, I'm going to add a new terrain type. I'm going to call this grass. I'm going to pick a color. I like a lime green. I don't want it to be too similar to the color of the tiles, otherwise it will be hard to see. There's different modes you can use. Match tiles and match vertices are similar to auto tiles you may have seen in the past, and categories control how different terrains connect to each other in complex ways. I'm just going to use match tiles. So here we have a new terrain called grass. I'm going to select it, and I'm going to use the dropper tool to give it a tile as an icon. So here I've given that grass tile as an icon. That just helps me see which one it is at a glance. Now, these options help me set up the tiles as a terrain. I'm going to select the paint terrain types, and then I'm going to set all of these tiles to be part of the grass terrain. That's what that little green square means. Now, using the pen, I can draw with this, which if I zoom in, and you'll see the terrain draws the tiles, but at the moment they're not organized in a way that makes any sense. It's just picking them at random because at the moment they're all equal. They're all just part of the terrain with no rules set up. So I'm going to select paint terrain connecting types and set up how these tiles should connect to each other. So the horizontal and vertical ones are quite easy. They just connect in a line. And the square ones, you might be tempted to fill in the whole thing, and that would probably work okay. But I'm just going to draw the horizontal and vertical connections because there's no real notion of a diagonal connection with only these tiles. So this is a nice simple pattern for 16 tiles. Now if I use the fill tool and fill that in, we can see it's made a good job of that. And indeed we can make more rectangles very quickly and easily. We can even get the pen tool and draw. Now this is only 16 tiles, so not every connection looks great. If I wanted to go in and draw more art, I could draw more tiles to control how each case looks, but this is just an example. So for now this is pretty good. That's a very easy way to set up a basic terrain. Okay, let's look at some more advanced terrain. I'm going to go to the tile set and add in additional tiles. Again, I'm going to automatically create the tiles. This defines 8 new tiles. They appear underneath down here. So let's have a quick look at the first one. This is another grass tile. It's just a different version of the center tile here. So I'm going to set it up the same. And what we should see when we draw is that it picks randomly between these two because they both fit equally well. So it picks either one. Now, maybe I don't really like that and I only want these zigzag ones to show up occasionally. Well, if we go into the tile set, just as you would for the built-in terrains, select that tile with the select tool, go to miscellaneous. We can change the probability. So let's say the probability is 0.1. So it should be about 10% of tiles. Now if I just use the fill grass and fill in that large blob, I'll adjust this. So what we see is about 10% of those center tiles have the zigzag feature, the zigzag graphic. There we go. Now what you might notice if you fill lots of times is that nothing changes. This option here, shuffle random tiles each update, if I turn that on, then every time I fill, you get a different layout of random tiles. So it depends. If you want it to be fixed, turn this off, and then you won't get constant updates when you're drawing. And if you want to reshuffle and re-roll your random tiles, turn that back on. I'm going to leave it on. Now, here's a brick tile. Now this is a much more minimal tile. Not every tile set you get will have every tile specified. Often you'll only have a couple or some cases, but not all of them. So this example is a brick. I'm going to call it brick. Let's make it a kind of purpley blue. Let's make it quite bright purpley blue. There we go. And once again, I'm going to use the dropper tool to get an icon for it. I'm going to make both of these part of the brick tile set. Now the easiest way to think about this is to go into the tile map and place the tiles down and think, when would we place these tiles? Well, the tile with the shadow seems good generally, and the tile without the shadow, well, that seems like it should have a tile to the right with a shadow, shouldn't it? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the rule for that one is it has to have a matching terrain type on the right. Now, when I paint with these, that looks good. You get the shadows on the right hand edge all the time. So what rules you use and how you set up the connecting types might vary. It really depends on what your tiles look like and how you want them to behave. Now we have a third terrain type underneath, which is like a sort of pole with a light on it. I'm going to call that light. I'm going to make that a bit more pink. There we go. And there we go. Using the dropper tool to set an icon. So let's look at these. So the light, well, that should have a connection underneath, and similarly this end one should have a connection above. The straight pole should have connections up and down. So that's very similar to the grass tiles here. But in this case, their tiles are laid out differently. And similarly, these connectors, top and bottom, should connect both to lights and probably to grass as well. But we may also want them to connect to brick. So I'll put a brick bit in as well. Now when it has two different colored bits in the same place, it'll match either one. Now if I draw with the light, we get a light pole, and it connects to the grass and to the bricks, and it can even be in the air. And if we put a bunch of them next to each other, they all behave quite well. You'll notice when there's only one, it just places an end. That's because there's no good tile for only one light pole on its own in isolation. So both of these endpoints are equally good in that they're the least wrong. So it just places one of them. That's the best it can do. As soon as you connect it up, it can match them exactly. Sometimes it can't make a perfect match, and it'll pick the best tile it can. It's up to you to provide all the tiles you need for the situations you're going to use. Now, let's look at the symmetry tools, which allow you to place terrains using tiles that are symmetrically duplicated. If you don't know about this, or if that's scary, don't worry. I'm going to put another tile set in here. Now this has some yellow and purple tiles, but it's only got 6 of each. Now if you're wondering how that can make a complete tile set, I'll demonstrate with the tile map. So we can make obviously the top here and the right corner, but for the edges and other corners, new in Godot 4.2, and if you're used to Godot 3 you might remember these, you can rotate and mirror and flip the tiles, and the shortcut keys for these are Z and X for rotation. So you can rotate the tile, and there we go, we can make a full blob out of these. Now these 6 tiles should cover all the same cases as the grass platform, but how do we make that into a terrain? Well, that's not too bad. Let's make another terrain type. I'm going to call this yellow blob. I'm going to make it sort of light green so it's not too similar. Once again, I'm going to use the dropper tool so that I have an icon for it. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set up the same sort of pattern here on these tiles using the yellow blob. So this is the center one that goes in all directions, the edge one, the corner, straight line, and an end one. And the last one is the same. Now of course that's not enough because it doesn't know how to use symmetry. So if I draw with those, it gets it right when it has the actual options, e.g. the top corner and in the center, but it doesn't know how to do the other stuff yet. So let's click on the symmetry tools and we can define symmetries. So there's various different options. What I'm going to do is all rotations. Now this will tell it that a tile can be rotated through any amount of 90-degree turns. I'm going to set this edge, the corner, and the dead end to be rotated because they can go in all 4 rotations. For the tunnel type piece, well, I'm not going to give it all 4 rotations because they would be duplicated. Like if you turn this tunnel piece 180 degrees, it would look the same. So I'm only going to give it the rotate clockwise. That means that it will place that tile either like that or rotated clockwise. Now all of these changes take account of the connection rules. So now if I fill this in, what we should see is it looks just right. And I can make some more of these. There we go, it all looks pretty good. Well, I mean, it looks like programmer art, but it looks like it's working. There we go, lovely. So these symmetry tools can really help you duplicate out terrain pieces that are going to be copies of other terrain pieces. So that's a real speed up for that. Now let's talk about categories. Categories allow you to mix and match terrains in some complex ways to make terrains act friendly towards each other or towards other tiles. So here we have a yellow blob. There's also a purple blob, which is the same. So I'm just going to set up the purple blob real quick. Let's make it a blue. Oh, a bit brighter. There we go. So I've given it an icon, and I'm going to set these tiles to be purple blob tiles. Now instead of setting up all the symmetry and connection rules, I'm going to copy them from the yellow tiles. So I'm going to select these yellow tiles with the select tool. I'm going to hit Control C to copy. And then we're going to switch to purple blob because I don't want to connect them to yellows, I want to connect them to purples. I'm going to hit Control V and place it. And there we go, that's the connection set up for them, and the symmetries are copied as well. Symmetries only show for the terrain you've got selected. So now I can paint with the purple blobs, and as you can see they work. So that was a very quick and easy way of doing that. But what if we wanted the purples and the yellows to connect, for example, so there was no barrier between them, but they just connected directly, just like that. Which you might want if you have two terrains that are similar and can act together as one, rather than always having a border. So one way we could do that would be to go in here and say, well, the yellow blob can also connect to the purple blob in every way, which is not too bad for two terrains, but what if you had 50 terrains? Well, that's going to be quite annoying. And that's not unrealistic as well. Some RPGs do have many different terrain types, or dungeon crawlers can have like lots of different shades of stone. It's a plausible situation. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a category called blobs. I'm going to make it a category. Now, I don't want to give it an icon of either one of them, so I'm going to right click on the image, copy the path. I'm going to click the edit terrain type to get back in here. I'm going to paste that path in. And there we go, we've got a different icon that's the tile set. But you can make your own icons and feed them in if you don't want to use tiles as icons. I'm going to click the up arrow to put the category before these two types of blob. That's not necessary strictly, but it helps me think about it. Now I'm going to go into yellow blob and say it is of type blobs by clicking the category checkbox, and same with the purple type. There we go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of these connecting bits as purple and as yellow, and then I'm going to use blob connecting bits and fill them in. So what I'm saying here is that yellow can connect to blob types in these ways, and purple can connect to blob types in these ways. But I also said that yellow and purple are both blob types, so they can connect to themselves and each other. So now, if we look at it, if I draw over these bits to get them to refresh, there we go, there we go. They get nice borders with empty squares, but when they come into contact with each other, they mix happily. So just to zoom in and show, between the yellow and the purple there's no borders, but between either one and the outside, or with the grass tiles, they do have a border. Now there's quite a lot of different terrain types, so I'm going to click this little button in the top left, and now we get more of a summary of the different terrains. That's nice and useful. Another way to use categories is to connect terrain up to tiles. I'm going to add another tile set called electricity. Here we go. This is an example for if you had a sort of city building game where you've got electricity, apples, I guess that's like a forester, a house and a tap, I guess that's the water, and some wires to connect them. Okay, so the wires, well, that's pretty straightforward. First, I'm going to make a category called electrical. It picks a pretty spot on color, but I'm going to change it because it's going to be hard to see. There's my category. I'm going to give that the electric symbol. Now I'm going to make a new terrain for electrical wire. Let's make that yellow. And that's of type electrical. Note that a terrain can be in more than one category. And that is going to get that icon. So I'm going to set these up as electrical types, and using the categories I'm going to make them connect only to other electrical types. And I'm going to set up the symmetry as before. Oops, that one, and all rotations on this, this, and this. So straight away we can draw with that. Looks good. But let's say we have a little city down here made of these 4 icons. Oops. These are not part of the terrain. Perhaps they're never placed as part of a terrain. They're just tiles that are placed as the game plays, which is a totally normal thing to happen. You can't expect every tile to be part of a terrain and connect up neatly. Games are much messier than that. So let's put some of these down. There we go. That's our city. It's beautiful. Now I want the electricity to connect up from the power plants to the houses, but I don't want the orchards or the water works to connect to electricity. So at the moment the electricity wires don't interact with any of these tiles. They're not part of any terrain, so it just ignores them. However, we can click on the category, and using just the type, paint terrain types, I can paint the category onto that tile and onto that tile, the electricity and the house. Now you can't paint with a category, but other terrains will recognize a category. So now if I draw the wires, you can see it won't connect up to the waterworks or the apples, but it will connect up to the houses. So that's another example of how you can use categories to control terrain behavior in a fine-grained way. The last thing I'm going to look at is the decoration tile, and this has been hanging around since the beginning. So once again I'm going to go to tile set, and I'm going to add in a new tile set called grass tufts. Now this is a mostly transparent tile set with just some little scuffy bits of grass. What I want to do with these is set them to appear above the grass tiles, so when we paint the grass it's going to have little fluffy bits of grass on top. I could make a separate terrain for these and try and draw on top of every grass block, but that would be pretty annoying. So what we have instead is a special terrain type called decoration. All decorations are equivalent to empty tiles. So in the eyes of Better Terrain as a plugin, it doesn't differentiate between empty tiles and decorations. So if I set these tiles to be decorations, well, initially they're not going to show up because they need at least one connection before a decoration will show up. So I'm going to say they connect to grass. Now when I paint some grass, or I fill in some grass or draw, you can see there are tufts of grass appearing on top. So if I look at the fill box, it doesn't connect up with these decorations. They are treated exactly as empty tiles. Again, you might not want every single tile to have them, so you can go into the tile set, select them with the select tool, set the probability. Actually, you could set all of them down to 0.1. There we go. Now they all have a 10% chance of appearing, which is not very much. In fact, you can make them. Let's make this one a bit more common. 20% for that, and 15% for that one. There we go. Okay, that's still pretty uncommon, but you might not want that much. It depends. It's your game, so however much you want, it's up to you. And just like before, we can set some mirror symmetry on these. We go down to decorations. And that means we'll get mirror images showing up as well. Oh, there we go. This grass tuft and then this one are mirror images, and these two are mirror images as well. There we go. You can also match against decorations for terrains which you want to match against empty tiles. So that is a possibility. It's a bit of an unusual use case. That's not like the wildcard matching in Godot 3. By default, better terrain wildcard matches against everything where you don't specify. So if you fill in a decoration peering type, that's specifically going to match against empty tiles. That's a little overview of some of the features of better terrain. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoy using the plugin. If you have any problems, comment here or post on the GitHub issues, and have fun making terrains. Goodbye.